All right, we are in for another session about cells and systems. And this time around, our lesson is about what makes something alive or not. Or in other words, what are the characteristics of living things? There was a PowerPoint that I sent out last time. The same PowerPoint goes along with this new lesson on video. But today what we're going to look at are what are the characteristics of living things. So how can you tell if something's alive or not? For example, this Coke can, Diet Coke can, living or not living? A volcano, living or not living? A raccoon, living or not living? A raccoon that is now dead, living or not living? So let's take a look at it. We're going to look at just the straight up examples of what makes something alive or not. So here are the characteristics of living things. Now, all living things share these characteristics in common. And I'll say this, sometimes you see 6 characteristics, sometimes you see 7, depending on what you're reading and what the source is or which website you're looking at or which worksheet. Basically, there's a couple that might have 1 or 2 of these characteristics melded together. I'm going to give you 7 characteristics in keywords. I'm going to try to share my screen for a second. Can't really remember how to do that. Oh, here we go. Hang on a second. Share my screen. I'm gonna try to share it with you here. This is the PowerPoint that I gave you the other day. And these were the things that we were looking at. In order to be considered alive, the first thing is that the thing that we're considering has to be composed of cells. So it has to be composed of living cells. Stop sharing. So number 1, made of cells or composed of cells. Now, cells in themselves, as you may have been reading, are living. So even if something is unicellular, that unicellular living organism will display all the characteristics. And because it's only 1 cell big, it's made of a cell too. But it has to be made of cells. Now, how is that different than being made of atoms? Well, here's the thing that you need to think about. There's only 2 types of things in the whole universe. There's matter and energy. Matter and energy. And matter is stuff, something physical, but it could be stuff that's on a microscopic level, like atoms. So atoms are the smallest parts of matter. So everything in the world is made up of atoms. Living things and non-living things. Are made up of atoms. The difference is that atoms make up cells, which make up living things. Okay, so atoms make up cells, which make up living things. Non-living things, like maybe the desk that you're sitting at, might be, if it's metal, could be rocks, could be minerals, could be air. Those things are all made up of atoms, but they are not living. Okay, they're things that are atoms that make up all matter, living and non-living, but they're not the same as cells. So cells have atoms in them, but so do the particles of non-living things. Okay, so that's important. So first characteristic is all living things are made up of cells. Time to flip the page. That's the one thing that is most often forgotten on unit tests and quizzes, by the way. Second thing is all living things reproduce. So every living thing has some kind of a mechanism through some type of reproduction to pass on the genetic material to the next generation. Sometimes that's through reproduction that's called asexual, and sometimes that's through reproduction that's called sexual. There's different types of reproduction, but the point is reproduction, living things will have some kind of mechanism to keep their cells dividing or creating offspring so that that species can continue. And don't forget, this includes plants and animals. Plants are living things as well, and sometimes we forget that plants are also made of cells and they reproduce. Now, there's certain non-living things that reproduce, like a photocopier. A photocopier is non-living. However, it does reproduce the images and the pages that you put into it. But that doesn't make it a living thing because it's not made of cells. So in order to be considered living, whatever you're thinking about needs to display all those characteristics, not just one in particular. Okay? Even unicellular organisms are able to reproduce. Okay? So single-celled species can pass on their genetics to the next generation. The third thing on your list is growth and repair. So living things have some type of a mechanism to experience growth, to be able to repair their tissues, to repair their cells, and to grow. Even if it's from one cell to a 2-cell, 3-cell, and multicellular organisms. We know that's true for plants. We know that that's true for animals. Number 4, I can't remember what order these were in. So I'm going to go back to the share screen. Make sure that we follow in the same order. The fourth characteristic that we have listed is there's some type of need for or ability to produce energy. Every living thing needs energy. Every living thing needs to have some type of way to produce energy, and we're no different. So this is true for plants and for animals. Plants get their energy directly from the sun, and they convert that sunlight into usable chemical energy through photosynthesis. We get our energy through the things that we eat along with other animals. Whenever you have energy production, you also have waste. So think of a car. You put gasoline in a car, it goes through the motor, it undergoes combustion, it burns, and then out the tailpipe, there's some gas, some exhaust. That is waste related to the burning of that fuel, which produces the energy to move the car. In humans or in plants, there's also wastes, and those wastes could be things like carbon dioxide gas, We breathe in air and we blow out carbon dioxide gas. The air that we breathe in has oxygen, which we use, and and we eliminate carbon dioxide, which is a gas. With plants, it's the opposite. Plants eliminate a waste called oxygen, and we make use of it. So there's all sorts of wastes that are related to that. The sixth thing is living things will have some kind of a lifespan or a life cycle. Living things rarely start off the way they finish. So if you think about a human actually starts at conception. So as soon as boom, two a sperm and an egg are united, you end up getting a genetically ready organism that can start to grow and develop. But eventually, you die. So you live, you reproduce, you die, and then it starts over. Certain other species change their form. Like a frog will go from an egg to a tadpole to a more adult type of a frog. That's kind of like a life cycle, but no matter what, it's eventually going to die. Even the giant redwood trees in the coast of California, Washington, Oregon, they can live for over 1,000 years, but eventually even those will die. And hopefully you get a chance to do number one, which is reproduce. Okay, so the last one, I got these out of order a little bit. The last thing that living things are able to do, something that you're thinking about is living if it can do all 7 of these things. And the final thing is respond to its environment. And again, this is true for plants, and it's also true for animals. So respond to the environment isn't the same as adapt to the environment. Adapt or adaptations is a very specific word in biology, and it means something a little bit different. But when we say respond to the environment, we could talk about trees when the daylight hours start to decrease and it gets colder. Deciduous trees will have leaves that will change their color. They'll stop going through photosynthesis. The leaves will brown or they get red or orange, and then they fall off. And that tree will start to get to a place where it almost hibernates until the spring, and then it responds to the environment again. When things warm up and there's more daylight, it'll start to flourish again. It'll grow back leaves. Human beings, even for ourselves, if it got really cold, our instinct would be to seek shelter. Geese are a great example because they migrate depending on what's going on with their environment. So one more thing that I want you to really think about here are that in order to be living, all seven characteristics are needed. Because there's certain things, when you stop to think about them, you could probably think of a few yourself. Certain things can display maybe 5 of these, but if they don't display all 7 characteristics, it may appear to be living, but it's not. So there's our lesson for today. Today there is a reading assignment, and there's some work to go along with today's lesson. So make sure you take a look at that, get it done, and have fun learning about cells and systems.
That was easy.
Oh, great.